So we discussed recreation fees, sort of got an idea of lessons learned from the past and suggestions for the future. We tried to eliminate anything related to legislation or any kind of appearance that we were trying to say what should be in the legislation, so we tried to eliminate from that. There was a little concern in the group about that. We got past it though. And then we talked a little bit about budget realities and how fees kind of play into that. And then the last topic we talked about was making sure that fees aren't a barrier to access for people to recreate. So first we went through just lessons learned and issues that the group noticed with fees and FLORIA in the past. And so some of the things, there's a lot, in general, there's a lot of inconsistency across all of the agencies as far as what types of fees they're collecting, why they have to collect those fees, or why they tell the public that they're collecting those fees. And then later, what the fees, how the fees can be used, how much of the fees get to stay on the unit versus have to go up to a corporate level for the core, what would have to go up to the Treasury. There's concerns about setting fees and if the rules are really being followed, and a lot of this was kind of centered around concerns about the public involvement process, and if the public was really properly asked what they think about charging a new fee. And there was also some concern that the resource advisory committees are either too slow and or they're just approving all the fees, haven't really rejected very many of them, so there's just sort of just been this, I guess, ballooning effect of number of fees that are out there. And then there was also a note that potentially concessioners are being asked to charge fees, or they're taking over different aspects of a recreation area's operation so that fees can be charged, because you don't have to have the public involvement process to be able to have fees charged for that. Then we talked a lot about transparency, and there was some discussion as far as the fee setting, but most of this had to do with how fees are used. So it used to be with fee demo that you had to report how much fees came in, how you spent them, and then what percentage of those fees were used for overhead costs. You don't have to do that anymore with FLORIA. Park Service does, and so they're pretty able to report back that information if anyone asks for it, but not necessarily the case with some of the other agencies. It's sort of, I got the impression, hit or miss with, depending on the unit or the agency itself. So there are mechanisms in place, and there's the triennial report that has to go to Congress, but beyond that, nothing on a project level basis or on an annual basis. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what we heard.
Well, every agency has their own guidance on reporting.
So internal and external accountability are really important. People internally to the agency need to understand, and actually the Park Service noted that this is sort of a competition between different units to try to keep, so that everyone's keeping track of what everyone else is doing. So there's sort of an internal accountability that everyone can see what other projects are because there's reporting internally about what each of the projects are doing. And then the external accountability is there if anyone asks for it. Okay, then we talked primarily in the first session about technology and how that should be used with fees, and how technology should be used for fee collection and then just general administration of fee programs. We're talking a little bit about how fee collection methods might take the place of a person being on the ground, but everyone sort of agreed that the person on the ground is a lot of times the first and a lot of times the only person that that can set the tone for the person for a visitor when they're coming to a recreation area. And then of course there's issues with accessing technology in remote areas. You don't want to have to pay for parking with a cell phone if you don't have any cell service at the area. So America the Beautiful, this is confusing, especially with core sites because it doesn't apply there. And then also the Golden Age and senior passes. This is an issue because of the subsidy, and we talked about this yesterday. Potentially, you're subsidizing the use of the people that are using the Golden Age and senior passes with higher fees for other folks. So as far as future and what to do about the fees, without putting it in black and white, everyone sort of agreed that the core needs to be part of Floria, but we want to write that, so we just said fees should remain with the unit. Yeah. And then one of the options that was kind of thrown out there is, well, what if you went back to, we weren't sure what the 1998 to 2002 practice was called, where you got to actually keep above a certain threshold of your fees on the unit, but that was one possibility that they could go back to something like that. And then there was a concern raised that if the core kept the fees, that would be money that's not going to the Treasury, so they need to propose some other kind of offset that the Treasury is not getting from them. So fees and the need for fees are unique to each agency and to each unit, honestly. So there needs to be a definition for allowing for that flexibility, but then there also needs to be consistency at the same time. So that's a really big challenge, I guess, moving forward. And then a clear definition of how funds can be used and how that's reported to the public. It's really important for visitors to understand that the fees that they're paying stay on the unit. I mean, we saw that in the video yesterday, we heard that a lot yesterday. Everyone pretty much agrees that in order for visitors to really feel like they're getting value from what they're paying, they need to know what their fees are being used for. Technology is making fees a part of trip planning is to help so that people aren't surprised when they get to the location that they have to pay a fee to get into to the unit. And then everyone sort of agreed in the group that technology as far as fees should be an enhancement and not an obligation, not something that should be written into the law. You have to use X kind of technology for fee collection. Okay, so next we talked about budget challenges and fees related to that. In general, if funding is going away, there's concern that you're going to lose sites and lose the ability for visitors to access those sites and cause other ancillary issues that would be associated with that. When you are trying to make a decision, though, about how to use limited budget resources, knowing what your market wants and knowing who's using it, and this goes back to the presentation we just saw, is really important. And it was suggested that maybe only use funds for sites where people are actually, that there's a market demand for it. One of the suggestions from the Corps, they have an asset management program process that they go through a cost-benefit analysis to try to decide where their budget dollars should be going as far as for their recreation assets. And then there were sort of conflicting, I guess, thoughts about O&M and if fees should be able to be used for O&M or if they need to stay separate and you just need to use appropriate dollars for O&M. So we had the first group that went through this session really felt that O&M needed to be separate, fees should not be used to pay for it. The second group, exact opposite.
Yeah, the first group thought that fees should be tied to the visitor. Yeah.
Like visitor projects. So then this sort of goes in, if you are going to use fees for O&M, or even if Floria does move forward, you need to continue to have, a mechanism so that Congress doesn't cut your appropriated dollars just because you have fee dollars coming in, so it doesn't become an offset. And then, so fees are going to become more important as budgets are going down, so the public needs to know, like I just mentioned, how their fees are being spent locally. And then, should there be consequences when fees are offsetting operating dollars? Again, that came from the first session where people were concerned about the mixing, I guess. this is more of that. I guess then there's other issues related to fees. Recreation isn't the only mission of all of the agencies that are here. And so the Corps gave the example of Hurricane Katrina, and when that happened, a lot of their funding for recreation went to solving that emergency problem. And that happens, maybe not on that necessarily that scale, but that happens for all the agencies, that the funds need to be used for other purposes. So fees, if you have fees on the unit, that can help with that. And then the Corps also brought up the issue with the primary purpose of the locks and dams that they have are for commercial traffic, but they're really used for recreationists, and there's a lot of unfunded maintenance issues that are result from that. And then how can we make sure that the fee program isn't going to be a barrier to access? Well, there's the fee-free days that we have already, but then there are some ideas for additional revenues at the unit, which the next group is probably going to go in to talk to, but these are some of the ideas that came out, and that's just partnership and cost-sharing opportunities, doing corporate sponsorships, not in an obscene manner, I guess. That was sort of a hot topic, just make sure it's done nicely, and not like, I gave the example of Grand Canyon brought to you by REI or something like that. You would want to have. And then the concept of matching funds from potential partners, potential sponsors with rec fee dollars, and then using citation or other types of recourse for vandalism and other illegal activities that are happening, to clean that up and to then also donate to the unit for what's happening.